even though I wish he was here, I'm at peace with him not being here in the physical form because I watched him deteriorate. And selfishly, I think God did that for me because he knew that I wouldn't be okay with him just leaving.
My father died on June 20th, 2018. I was 37 years old, and suddenly everything I knew about myself was uprooted. I had so many questions, and there were so many layers to peel back. Who was my daddy? And who am I as a result? What was his legacy? And what will mine be? My mantra for 2019 was happy, healthy, whole. I was determined to face my grief and heal. And my girls were there with me every single step of the way. I found strength in my vulnerability, and we had open, honest, transparent conversations. And that's what we're gonna do here in this space. So grab your journal, light some candles, pour a glass of wine, and get cozy. I'm Charity Bailey, and girl, we need to talk. Aside from the episode where you met my sisters, this one is hard for me. And that's because it's called Daddy's Girls. And I'm a daddy's girl. When he died, when he left, it left a hole in my heart. See, he's the first man I ever loved. I learned to give and receive love from him. And that's the case with the ladies that you're going to meet in today's episodes. They are some of my closest girlfriends who have also lost their fathers. We have Alicia, Amanda, Karli, and Jessica. And I'm so honored that you guys chose to share your stories with me today. Hey, ladies.
Hey, Charity.
So let's talk about our daddies. Alicia, we'll start with you. Tell me a little bit about your dad.
My dad was amazing. I'm definitely a daddy's girl myself, through and through. He was a musician. He was very much in the political scene. He was also an alcoholic. And so for the first 8 years of my life, my dad was a very different person than he was when he went to treatment. And I was very thankful that he went there, and for the rest of his life until he passed away at 65, he was in recovery. And I will forever be proud of him for that. But he just supported me through and through. To this day, he's the only man who's ever truly loved me. And he taught me how to be great, how to love myself, and how to walk tall as a Black woman in this world.
Now, you mentioned his addiction, and it's interesting because as I peel back the layers of who my daddy was, right, there's all of these layers. There's the good, the bad, the ugly, but they all shape this beautiful human. And while Alicia mentioned, that he went into recovery when she was 8, Karli, you lost your dad at a very young age. So tell us about him and tell us what that's been like for you, because I believe you were 10 years old when your dad passed, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, my dad was the coolest. I get to hear stories about him from his friends and family, and they always say how charismatic he was, like a movie star almost, and a great dresser, a great dancer, athletic. To me, he was all those things as well and more. He was fun. Like, we always doing things in those 10 years, and he was proud of me. I knew that without a doubt. So yeah, I was 10 years old when he passed, and my dad was a brilliant, passionate person, but he suffered from multiple sclerosis, which is a physical and neurological disease, and also bipolar disorder, which is mental. So unfortunately, he had two very difficult things to deal with at a young age. He was in his early 40s. And for someone as charismatic and just larger than life, those two things together were, fatal. So my dad did die by suicide when I was 10. And it was after his physical disability was, increasing, which impacted the mental, of course. I was old enough to understand the literal sense of my dad passing away, but not to understand the emotional sense. So while I don't want to come off sounding callous, when my mom told us that, Daddy went to heaven, I of course burst into tears and was sad and grieving, mourning. But I didn't really understand the full impact of what that loss meant at that time in my life. So in a way, I was sort of protected because my emotional maturity wasn't the same as, say, my sister, who was 14 at the time. So
even when you have emotional maturity, it's hard to wrap your mind around suicide, right? Mm-hmm. When my uncle died by suicide, you really helped me walk through that. And I believe I was 29, 30.
Yeah.
I mean, older.
Yeah, I remember us having those conversations, and I know you know this, it's my like miniature mission in life to get people to even just use that verbiage, died by suicide, because we're all taught growing up committed, which perpetuates the stigma that there's something wrong with someone who did that. It's like committing a crime, and it's not. I sought to learn more about his conditions in college. And I took a lot of social work and sociology classes and psychology classes with the sole intention of learning about him. I don't work in those fields. And I would go into my professor's office hours and talk about my dad. And one of them said to me, "My gosh, Karli, he had MS and bipolar." She was like, "That's terminal." And hearing that lifted a lot of, the questions I had, and also made me braver in sharing his story. I always try and be sensitive to what my mom and my sister may or may not be comfortable sharing about our dad. But I've always stood pretty, firmly in the belief that sharing his story, the whole story, it honors his legacy. I'm not ashamed to say how he passed and what he had to deal with, because as I mentioned, my professor said it was terminal. Those two things are awful, especially for a person like my dad being, like I said, so larger than life.
Yeah, well, the thing is, our parents are just people. I say that often. And our dads, as you peel back who they are, they're so complex and there's so much going on. And for me, I learned a lot about my dad in his death as well, just as much as I learned in his life. Jessica, what's something that you've learned about your dad after he died and understanding him as a human first?
Well, I would say one of the first things that I found after my dad died, because I had to clean out the place that he lived at, but I found a bunch of music that I didn't even know he listened to. So I have like a whole playlist with a bunch of that music, and then music I knew he listened to over and over again. But I think that's one thing that stands out, because every time it's a Father's Day or it's his birthday or, special occasions where I want to feel more like he's with me, I put on that playlist. And so those songs that I didn't even know he liked, like it helped me feel like I was connecting with him more. I also had access to all of his email accounts. So I had to, so when he passed away, exactly though. So it was weird to it felt wrong at first, to be honest, because a lot of people were still emailing him. And so I felt like it was my responsibility to let them know that he was gone, So I was going through and reading through his emails and stuff. And I don't know, I won't share all of that here, but it did make me feel, more connected to him, because I was seeing stuff aside of him that I didn't see. He was my dad. So I saw him as that figure all the time, but not as a friend or as somebody that he is dating or, so.
Yeah. All the different faces that our parents wear, that we wear, right? But we just call them daddy. Now, Jessica mentioned music. Alicia and Karli both mentioned dancing. Now, Amanda, I had the opportunity to meet your dad and to spend time with him, and he was the life of the party, and he was a musician too. Tell me what you missed most about him.
I love that we all say that our dads are the coolest, because, obviously I think mine is also the coolest. I think my dad was just such a being of light. I miss his presence. If I could close my eyes and just feel that again, I think that's what I miss the most. He had a way of making everyone around him feel very comfortable. You know, he was very silly. He was always laughing, joking around. Even when he was quiet, um, he would hum underneath his breath. And sometimes, whenever he had a chance, he would be tapping with his hands on pretty much mimicking a drum, the sound of a drum on any surface that he can find. So I think I miss those quiet things about him even more, just like, you know, glancing over and just noticing his essence was my favorite thing. And obviously losing him, I found that I had to look outside into the world for that. But nothing was suffice. And then one day I remember I was getting a massage, and it was around the anniversary of his death, and I was bawling, of course, and privately. And so the massage therapist asked me, what's wrong? And I just said, I think the thing that bothers me the most about his death is that I feel like so much of me was wrapped around him, or, you know, the idea of him or who he was. And then she goes, no, flip that around. So much of him is wrapped up in you. And so at that moment, I started to just connect with the aspects of myself that reminded me of him.
Yeah.
And it was music also. By the way, my dad was a musician. So like I said, he used to play the piano, and he was a percussionist. So he had music in his head. And similar to one of the ladies' experiences, I think it was you, Jessica, every time I would hear certain songs, it just made me feel more connected to him. So that's how I cope.
And it's interesting that you mentioned them being wrapped around us, because my dad was also larger than life, you know, in spirit and physically. He was 6'5", had big hands, you know, this roaring, thunderous laugh. And I've told people before, like, I knew my dad was in the room before I actually saw him. Like, I could feel him because he was just that dude that you could feel. And so him not being here, you know, I feel it. So how do you guys think that your relationship with your dad shaped the way you experience love? Alicia, let's start with you.
Well, it's something that I'm actually working on, because I see that I only see the good in people. I saw my dad at such a bad state when he was an alcoholic. He was like a totally different person, and I saw things that I should have never seen. But then I saw him transform into this amazing man that just loved me and just was such a hard worker. And like all of your dads, was the life of the party, hilarious. And I saw this amazing man. So the transformation is like what I'm kind of attracted to, if that makes sense. And so I've really looked for people that, like, well, I know he'll be good. I know he can change. I know there's a good person in there, because my dad did model that for me. But he also modeled so many things that I want in, you know, my future mate as well. So it's not all bad, but I think that there's some unlearning that I have to do there too, just because of the transition of him. I mean, he was such an amazing man, and then he wasn't amazing for the first part of my life. And so I see that people can change and be different. And that's a great quality, I think, to have, but it's not when you keep looking for it in people, because you can't change somebody, you know, they have to change themselves. So.
And it's interesting you say that, because I've spoken to my therapist about that as well, because there's the yin and the yang. And I think as daddy's girls, we've learned to love the good, accept the bad, and then give grace in between. And so in relationships, you have to give grace because we're people. But there's also that thing that goes, hey, bro, if you step over this line, which my dad stepped over hella times, I'm driving a car through the house. Now what? You know, like, we're not doing that.
We are not.
But my sisters and I often talk about how you kind of learn to peel back who a man is, but that also is not okay. You know, like you got to accept the red flags for what they are and go, you are a good person, but you know, not for me.
Need a little work before we.
Right. You're going to have to go lay on somebody's couch and get some therapy too. Now, Amanda and Karli are married, and Jessica's been in a long-term relationship. So, Amanda, I know that your dad's death was sudden, and your husband actually called me and said, "Hey, can you head over to my house because Amanda's dad just died and he was out working." But of course, he came back and he's been by your side. So, how has losing your dad changed the way that you see love and maybe even interact with your husband or see him in a different light?
Great question. I think I wanted to talk about a little bit about how how my dad loving me affected my relationship before
Okay.
being married. I think I had like the highest standards and sometimes maybe a little unrealistic when it came to my now husband. I felt like I wasn't afraid to say that he had big shoes to fill. And, I sometimes sized them up and said, well, you need to be like this, or I don't understand that. Well, my dad does this, And then as I matured, remember, I've been with my husband now for I've known him for 10 years and we're married for 5. So as my relationship matured, it changed. And I often looked to my dad to help understand men. And he would just tell me to focus on the love and that to always try to meet everything from a loving angle. And it sounds simple, but when you're upset or going through things, it's kind of like the hardest thing to do. So I think when I lost my dad and I was married, I automatically looked over to my husband and was like, all right, you're up.
Yeah.
It's your chance now to kind of, I don't know, take the torch and help me through this. I felt like my relationship with my dad was so strong and we were very close. So not to say I put one before the other, but I just felt the shift right away.
Yeah. So do you think that that's too much pressure to put on another person, like on your partner? Like, hey, my dad's not here, step up. Or do you think it's a natural shift that happens for some people?
I think it is a lot of pressure in hindsight. Sometimes when you're dealing with things emotionally, you don't think about how that's going to affect another person. But since I'm very direct and vocal, that's what I said initially. How it played out was different, because maybe I learned how to let my guards down like I did with my dad, with him after my dad was gone. And maybe I learned how to add grace to the situation and to accept someone else for all of their flaws the way that I did my dad.
Amanda, can I ask you, when did your dad
Yeah.
pass away? Like, how long ago was it?
It was actually September 29th, 2017. It was the year that my son was born, several months after my son was born.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So your dad also got the opportunity to meet your son, which was pretty special for you too.
Oh yeah. Like I said, we were very close. So I feel like our whole relationship was very intentional, very purposeful, and fulfilling. Like when he passed, I was upset, obviously, but I didn't feel like there was anything left unsaid. I didn't think I needed, to love him more or show him more. It felt complete. I guess I was just being selfish and I just wanted him to be there forever. Like I'm sure we all did.
Right.
I have to admit, that's one of the hardest. That's one of the hardest things for me is like my dad wasn't here to see any of that, I won't have him to walk me down the aisle or see the birth of my children or my adopted children or whatever God has for me. But that's really hard. Like even at wedding, my dad passed away 9 years ago, which is still crazy for me to say. And I am at peace with, even though I wish he was here, I'm at peace with him not being here in the physical form because I watched him deteriorate. And selfishly, I think God did that for me because he knew that I wouldn't be okay with him just leaving. Like, I had to watch the process. But that still bothers me. When I go to weddings or see the first daddy-daughter dance, like, I can't do it. So, like, I'm totally gonna elope. So I swear to you, I'm going to. Plus, I just want to save money, but also, I don't think I can do it, to be honest with you. So,
Jessica, I see you nodding your head over there, and we've had a lot of conversations about similar things.
Charity. I mean, we went to Jake's wedding. He's a camera person that works for our show, I guess. He has a lot of roles these days, but I'm gonna still call him that.
He's a photographer, yeah.
Yeah, he's a photographer. But when we were at his wedding, I'm the same way, where like whenever there was the first daddy-daughter dance, I was trying really hard not to just lose it, because it's I was so happy that she got that moment with her dad, but I don't get that moment. So I remember looking over at you, Charity, because I was like, oh, like, yeah.
It was like you got me, I got you. All right.
Yeah, so I totally get that, because I feel the same way. That was one of the things that was really hard, because my dad passed away right before I graduated college. So I was very aware that he wasn't going to be there for my graduation and like all of the big milestones. And that's tough. It still is tough. That wedding was just a few months ago. Like that,
Before the world shut down. It was like February.
Yeah.
And
well, if I could interject, two things. One, Amanda, I want to echo what you're saying about the standards, the high standards. You're not the only one. My dad set the bar high. And one of my favorite things to share to illustrate that is I was born on March 3rd. On March 4th, I had a dozen pink roses sent to me with a note that said, just a little something to remind you of the first guy that ever bought you roses, your father. I love you. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
So I expected the storybook. I know all of it, or I shouldn't say all of us. I know a lot of us here are very spiritual and, faith-based, and my family's like our family number is 5. And 5 years after my dad passed is when I met Sean and started dating him. And like, that's just one of those little like breadcrumbs, the little heavenly breadcrumbs that I pay attention to. So Alicia, to your point, and Charity and Jessica, about not having your dad physically here for those moments, I didn't have him. He didn't see 5th grade graduation. He wasn't here for any of my graduations, my wedding, birth of my son, none of those things, but he is. And I know I see you all nodding. I know you all agree with those sorts of things, but like, if you really pay attention, it's like so obvious that you just throw your hair back and just laugh.
Yeah, it's the little spaces where they show up though, right? And Jessica, you mentioned the first dance, and Karli, your dad wasn't there for that first dance, but I recall being at Aaron and Joe's wedding, my really good friends, and they're the producer and director editor on this project. And when Aaron started to dance with her dad, like I just lost it. It was a silent lost it, but I lost it. And one of our other friends, Doug, was also a former coworker. He looked across like Jessica and I did, and he said, "It's okay. I had a hard time for a long time during the mother-son dance." And he's married, but it's the people also in our lives who make it okay for us to feel and kind of validate the feeling so that we don't feel like we're going nuts, because there are the spaces where you just feel like you're just going crazy. Like, am I losing my mind? And I recall Jessica took me to a baseball game, and we were sitting there, and I said to you, Jessica, I said, will I ever be the same again? And you answered me, and I'll let you tell the people, will you be the same again for those who are trying to figure this part of grief out?
Yes and no.
Yeah.
Like I I can't speak for everybody because I think, you know, people, they all grieve differently. Everybody grieves differently. But I think, Charity, in that moment when we were at that baseball game and you asked me that, I could tell that you were heavy in it. You know what I mean? Like right after my dad passed away, I just, for weeks, I felt like I was constantly about to throw up. Like I just had so much like grief on me, you know? And then, you know, it starts to get a little lighter. Like you get a few months away from it and it's a little lighter. You still like, you know, want to talk about him all the time to everybody. And then years later, you miss him. You still think about him often, but it's not, I don't have that throw up feeling anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think what I said to you was, yeah, you're going to be okay eventually. You're going to always miss him probably.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And
I think I think it hits at different times too. As I said earlier, like the emotional heaviness of it didn't really hit me. I mean, the same because I was only 10. But I remember, and also I should say, my mom did can I say kick ass? I don't know.
You can say, ma'am, we are free. This is the internet. Go ahead.
I was going to say that it hits differently. I, you know, mourned my dad and grieved my dad when I was 10 when he first passed. But my mom did such a phenomenal job stepping in and making me and my sister want for nothing our whole, you know, young lives, that it didn't hit me really, really hard until I went away to college and I was on my own. And I remember I was homesick. I was contemplating whether or not I should transfer schools, which for someone like me was like a really big deal. And I remember being in my dorm and I was like, what would my dad think? And I was like, whoa, I've never asked that before because I hadn't needed to. And so in that moment, I was like, oh, wow, like I probably have missed out on more than I even can imagine, not having his guidance physically in my life for all those years. But yeah, I mean, that's like a gap of however many years, 10, 11 years, where, not to say I didn't think about it in between, but where it really like hit me hard. Like, oh, it's a huge loss.
Yeah. And so that's the thing. You kind of have those moments where you know that he's gone, but then it just hits you. So Amanda, tell me about a moment that hit you like, wait, my dad's not here. I can't call
him. I used to talk to my dad almost every day. And then even more so as I became an adult and I was like going through things that I wasn't afraid or shy to share things with him and ask him for his opinion on stuff that I was going through. So I remember the feeling every time I had a moment of excitement or a new job or a milestone in my son's life, where I literally picked up my phone and was ready to dial for my dad. And then I realized that I couldn't do that. And I think that's when it hit me the most. Because I was like, wait, so is he not supposed to know these things now? And then I started just saying them out loud to him, obviously in private, you know, on my own. I would just say, Dad, this happened. I really wish I could tell you how I feel right now. I know you can hear me, but I just wish I can hear your voice.
Yeah.
And I think those were the times when it hit me the hardest. Like when I you just forget. I guess your body or your mind just automatically does things that you're used to. And for me, that was one of them.
Yeah. It's a lot. It's a lot. And trying to like process it all is a lot. And trying to live it and go about your everyday life and show up as a mom, you know, as a colleague, just in general. It's hard. And you know, you both mentioned, you know, the way it shifts And it's a lot.
One way it's manifested in me in a sort of, I guess, untraditional way is it gave me a lot of anxiety, and I've created a lot of rituals to deal with it. So the backstory is, and I've gone to therapy to work through these things. And I remember one of the therapists was like, well, do you know when you started, worrying like this? And I said, absolutely, the day my dad died. And what happened was I was with my mom at home, and she got a phone call, and she maintained her composure, but the energy was off. And she was like, oh, Karli, you got to go across the street to the neighbors. They're going to take you to dinner. And that was weird. So the whole time where I was with the neighbors, I was like thinking like, what could this be? Why did my mom send me here, short notice? And, what happened? And I went through all sorts of things that a 10-year-old would think, happened. And one of the things that crossed my mind was, did my dad die? And I don't know why my brain went there, but it did. And then later that night, my mom told us that daddy went to heaven. And it's like that connection of like, I thought it and it happened has stayed with me.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of illogical things that happen, right? Because your mind knows that like, oh, that's not going to dictate whether someone is here tomorrow or not, but you still have to do it. It's like it's a thing. And just to ask you a whole lot of questions as this was, as I was trying to process my grief. And one of them was that very thing. Like, do you suddenly think that everybody's going to die?
Yeah, I still that's something I still have to watch out for myself too, because I thought it was just because I was like in college at the time. So hearing other people say that they had a loss, because I call it a loss of security. Like I basically constantly kind of have this feeling like, oh, and because my dad died suddenly, that something really bad could happen at any moment. And I sort of had like a lot of anxiety at first that could happen. And especially for people I loved, and now it's a little less of that. But still, like every time I fly in a plane when I'm coming back from seeing my family, I'm scared I won't ever get to see them again, because it reminds me of it when I was coming back from seeing my dad the last time I saw him before he passed away. So there is that constant fear that the people that you really love, like you're going to go through that pain again. For me, that's how I feel anyway.
And Alicia, what about you?
Sorry, I'm like losing it over here. I didn't expect to be this emotional, to be honest with you.
Okay, this is a safe space. We're all here for you, sis.
I think I'm really emotional right now because it has been really hard the last 2 years not having my dad here. I had like big changes in my life, and I really needed his like cheerleader. Like I really needed him to like cheer me on and tell me it's going to be okay. My dad was really into politics. And even though obviously this whole Trump situation would have been all bad, okay? but all the social unrest that has obviously been happening for years, but it's highlighted, I've been wanting to talk to him about it. Like hug him, have him tell me that it's okay, that no matter what people say, I'm worth it. No matter what hate comes my way, like, you're a queen, So I don't think I've had like the space to really get through that, because it really has been bothering me. Sorry, hold on 1 second. I'm running out of tissue. Well, it's toilet paper, but yeah.
Okay.
It's on my lip. But
we ain't gonna have you out here like Michael Irvin last night.
Listen, all the makeup is running off and eyelash might come down, so just let it go. So I've lost a lot of people in my life. There's been a lot of death in my life. I've lost 4 men in my life that meant the world to me. And my dad obviously is one of them. My brother died in a car accident. My dad died. My uncle Calvin recently passed away. And my grandfather. So I have this thing of like people always leaving me. Like I have that, and I know that, especially with men. And I think that plays into my relationships too, going to the prior question that you asked me, is I literally just, you know, I almost don't want to hang on to them because I feel like they're going to go. And yeah, that's definitely something that I feel for sure.
Yeah.
Can I just piggyback off of what she said? Like it was like years after my dad passed away that I was scared definitely to have close friendships where I would love somebody a lot, especially like a romantic partner if he was male. I kind of wanted a lighter relationship because then if I lost it or something happened, I wasn't going to feel the hurt my dad I felt with my dad passing away. So like I totally get what you're saying. I think like eventually, honestly, my boyfriend that I'm with now and I've been with for a while, I don't know that I would have opened up to letting myself be with him if he hadn't also lost his dad. So it like connected us in a way that like forced me to be like, okay, I'm gonna try and be open to this. You know what I mean? So
yeah. I just want to do this one last question. Something that has really stood out to me that I didn't understand before as much is how grieving people can trigger your grief. And Amanda, you know where I'm going with this. So Amanda was there with me, as all of you were, when I found out my dad got sick. And so every step of the way, she was there calling, checking in, yada, yada. And then we got the call that he passed. And I was like, I messaged her and I didn't hear back. And then her and her husband, we become family here. So they invited me over. And our friendship is so strong that we can be honest. And I said to her, because, you know, she said, I'm sorry. And I said, well, I felt like you just kind of left me. Like, I haven't heard from you, yada, yada. And Amanda, I'll let you tell them what you said to me.
So Charity and I also had a similar, I would say, situation going on when it came to communication as my dad and I. We spoke very often without words. It was telepathic, so to speak. And you can ask her, there's a lot of times that I knew things were wrong with her before she even said it, or even before I even saw her. And I would just feel drawn to her. And I remember when she came over, I felt like I immediately had to apologize because I can sense that she knew that I was being distant. And I knew, and I acknowledged that I was. Even though it wasn't intentional, I just said, I'm sorry. I didn't realize that I couldn't go there. When I found out your dad passed, I think that was it emotionally for me. You know, I was strong leading up to there. I was trying to be supportive and, you know, stay in the loop and just let her know that I was around. But when her dad passed, it just made all of my feelings rush back in. And I just froze.
Yeah. And the reason I asked you to express that is because that is a very real feeling. And when you said that to me, it stuck with me because now when other folks lose someone, like, so we talk about all the crazy things we do. Sometimes I won't even like or hit the prayer hands and the heart on someone because I'm like, what if it's me next again? But you see that someone you love has lost a loved one or their dad specifically, and it suddenly sends you spiraling back into your grief. And I did not know that was a thing. She said it. We're close enough for her to express that to me. But now I understand it because it happens to me. And it's like, wait, what is that? But it's a trigger. There's so many triggers. And to your point, your dad had passed in September 2017. It hadn't even been a full year yet. And here you are trying to console me while you're still healing. So you're wounded, limping, trying to pick me up off the ground, you know? And all of you did that for me in different ways. And I appreciate you. I appreciate you for sharing your heart today. I was going to ask you if there was something you could say to your dad, what would it be? But they're here with us. They're here. Your dad sees you, Alicia, Mr. Oliver sees the last 2 years. And Amanda, your dad, Mr. Carlos, he sees you and your son and your thriving family. And Karli, those roses and the joy. I think he said Sean. I'm like, Daddy, can you send me a Sean? He out here building she
For
stands and
real.
stuff.
I believe it, that meeting Sean as early in life as I did and getting to grow up with him, and now, God willing, grow old with him, is my blessing for enduring that loss. Truly.
Yeah.
And to sum this up, Sean did go to my dad's gravesite to ask permission to ask me to marry him. So he understands who my dad is and understands that relationship and respects it. And so it's been good. And yeah.
Well, Jessica, Mr. Kenneth sees you too, honey. And perhaps he sent your current boo too, because he's a great person. And I appreciate you all so much. So with that said, how about a little toast? Ooh, I had to fill her up just a little bit. Oh, KB comes with the whole bottle, child. Ladies, thank you for your transparency. And Lacey, stop.
She's saying, Charity, why aren't you thanking me?
Right.
You need to thank her.
Oh, goodness. Ladies, I appreciate you. You know, when we talk about grief, suddenly everyone gets tense. And what I try to explain to folks is that when I'm with my girlfriends, you know, we laugh, we cry, we talk, we do it again, you know, and this is kind of how it goes. And in the midst of it, we have each other and we love each other. Can y'all hear Lacey?
She just has some stuff to say too.
Oh, okay. I was going to air and I just didn't know if y'all wanted me to. Oh, goodness. Oh, all right. As we toast, I'm going to let y'all see.
He is so cute.
Lacey. She got the blowout today.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like Lacey is my little gift from my daddy too. So y'all can keep your sons. I'm going to stick to Lacey. I love you, ladies. Cheers to our dads.
Love you too. Cheers.
Cheers. On the next Girl We Need to Talk.
One of the things that I posted earlier this year was trust the reroute. And that spoke volumes to me, because when I tell you there's been so many reroutes in my life, in relationships and in business, and just so much that you've got to learn to trust that, especially if you're a believer, you know, that all things truly are going to work out for your good, and to have faith, which means that we don't know how it's going to turn out, but we can have a good mindset, you know, and set goals and do what we know to do, and just trust that it's going to all come together at a, you know, point in time when it's supposed to.
Thank you for watching Girl We Need to Talk. You can find me across all social media platforms at Miss Charity Bailey. Make sure you like and subscribe.